116 years ago, in 1903, the first prototype of an airplane flew over the ground. Flyer 1, a motor airplane of the Wright brothers, was able to cover a distance of 37 meters. 10 years later, on the opposite western coast of the United States, in Seattle, by chance, at a trade exhibition, the story of one of the leading aerospace corporations in the world began. Leaving his studies at Yale University, experience in the woodworking business, and, of course, a desire to fly, that was the entire baggage of the American William Boeing at the time of founding the company. In 1908, he, a successful owner of a woodworking business in Seattle, saw an airplane flight at an aviation exhibition and decided to dedicate his life to aviation. He meets a like-minded person, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant George Westervelt. He studies at the Glen Martin Flight School and in the summer of 1916 takes to the sky in his own seaplane, the Boeing Model 1. In fact, the first Boeing aircraft. The successful flight led to the founding of the company Pacific Aeroproducts, which, just a year later, adopted a name more familiar to us, Boeing Airplane Company.
When the war began in 1914, the American Army had only 55 aircraft at its disposal. 55! Even Belgium had much greater strength in aviation than America.
The first client was the American Army. An order for 50 aircraft for the military provided jobs for over 300 people and paid back the $100,000 William Boeing had previously invested. But the war ended, and with it, the demand for airplanes declined. Boeing was again at the starting point, having kept only the team. In desperation, they had to produce clothing, furniture, and boats. They found a solution by changing the concept of transportation.
One of the most significant steps taken by William Boeing, which brought his business to a national level, was the decision to secure a contract for airmail delivery.
This was one of the first international mail deliveries, from Canada to the US. Boeing didn't stop at this. By the late 1920s, fighters were successfully produced and listed among the largest US aircraft manufacturers. At the same time, the Boeing Model 80 appeared, designed for 21 people, including the crew. In fact, the company's first passenger aircraft.
Planes were a novelty in the US. No one seriously thought about what they are for. William Boeing outlined all aspects of this business in its charter. He spoke of extraordinary things, airports and air travel, concepts people could hardly imagine.
It was on Boeing plane in 1929 that flight attendants appeared for the first time in history. This nurse, Ellen Church, assembled a team of 7 women. All of them worked for the company Boeing Air Transport, founded by William Boeing. This is the current United Airlines, the third largest airline in the world. After 3 months of trial period, other airlines began to hire flight attendants as well. The salary was quite high at that time, from $100 to $120 per month. The requirements for candidates were quite sexist.
Applicants for the flight attendant position had to be attractive, short, unmarried, licensed nurses aged between 21 and 26, and weigh between 45 and 54 kilograms.
William Boeing left the company in 1934 due to its division. By that time, the holding had already been named Boeing Airplane and Transport Corporation for 5 years. The reason for division was antitrust law in the US. Aircraft manufacturers were banned from owning airlines.
Boeing Airplane and Transport Corporation was split into 3 companies, Boeing Aircraft Company and United Aircraft, which focused on aircraft manufacturing, and United Airlines, which handled air transportation.
True success came to the company during World War II. Aircraft for the military were produced at a frantic pace. By the end of 1944, Boeing was supplying the Army with more than 350 bombers every month. The most famous was B-17. In total, almost 13,000 of them were produced. And B-29, which had a production run of 4,000 units, ranked first among its counterparts until 1947. One of its modifications, this plane called Enola Gay, dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Over the next 20 years, Boeing made a series of successful developments. They released the jet aircraft Boeing 707, began manufacturing helicopters, and contributed to the development of the heavy-duty Saturn V rocket. And in 1967, the most important product was released, Boeing 737, the most widespread passenger jet. Its modification, 50 years later, would become the subject of a major scandal. It would cost hundreds of lives and damage the company's reputation. More on that later.
Imagine yourself in the shoes of Boeing's leadership in 1952. Engineers propose building a large jet aircraft for the civilian market. The company isn't in this market. All previous attempts have ended in failure. Until now, you've built mostly military aircraft, and 80% of orders came from one customer, the US Air Force. If you're running a company, you don't shy away from risk and set an audacious goal to make your company one of the biggest players in the passenger aircraft market.
This became possible in the late 60s.
The decision to create the 747 was irreversible for Boeing. During its creation, one of the company's visitors said to William Allen, its then director, "You know, a lot of what's important for the company will fly on this plane. What will you do if it crashes immediately after takeoff?" To which he replied, "I'd prefer to talk about something more pleasant, like nuclear war."
The moment of takeoff was a great relief. I was often asked if we were worried about our own safety. I think this is what we did not care about. We were very busy, and we were excited.
The wingspan of the 747 is almost twice the distance of the Wright brothers' first flight, 37 meters versus 60 meters. This aircraft caused a revolution in civil aviation. In the first 6 months, it carried about 1 million passengers, and for 35 years it held the leadership among the world's largest passenger airliners. About 50,000 employees worked on its creation for 16 months. For this aircraft, Boeing built the giant Boeing Everett factory in Washington state, the largest factory in the world.
Its dimensions are simply amazing.
It was confusing. I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going.
I've worked here for over 23 years, and still managed to get lost.
The area is 400,000 square meters, approximately 60 football fields, height of an 11-story building. There's even its own fire station on the premises. Here they built the latest modification of the 747, the Model 8, which was meant to restore the company's former glory. At the start of the ambitious project in 2005, the A380, Boeing's main competitor from Airbus, confidently held the lead among passenger aircraft. It is still the largest production passenger aircraft in the world. An updated version of Boeing appeared in 2012. Each such aircraft has more than 6 million parts. They don't manufacture them in Everett, they only assemble the aircraft there. Each part delivery has a specific time allocated. This allows to save money, not to overpay for the storage of parts that would lie idle in the warehouse.
Sometimes we run out of parts, but the key to successful operations and uninterrupted production is that the parts capable of halting the process never run out.
The Boeing 747 Model 8 really became the main competitor of the Airbus A380. However, the popularity of both has significantly decreased. The A380 is being discontinued, all due to the loss of relevance. These aircraft work perfectly in large hubs, reducing the number of flights and easing the load on airports. Everything changed due to low-cost carriers. People are increasingly choosing non-stop flights, and airlines are finding it harder to fill such large aircraft with passengers. Boeing is now a corporation worth $186 billion. The company employs more than 150,000 people. They have 9 types of civilian airliners, about 40 types of military equipment, and 10 developments in the space sector. Boeing has customers in 150 countries and cooperates with 20,000 suppliers and partners.
Southwest Airlines, a U.S. budget carrier, operates over 700 Boeing aircraft. More than 300 737 models carry passengers for the Irish low-cost carrier Ryanair. German Lufthansa operates 19 747 Model 8 aircraft and 13 of its predecessors.
Boeing's most popular aircraft are the 737, 787 Dreamliner, and 777. Do you know why all passenger plane names start with 7?
The engineering department divided the model numbers into blocks of 100 for each type of product. The numbers 300 and 400 represented aircraft, 500 were used for turbine engines, 600 for rockets, and 700 for jet transport aircraft.
The rest is the work of marketers. 700 was less appealing than 707. Now, to aircraft prices.
The Boeing 777-9 costs for $144 million. A cargo 747-8 is for $119 million. And a passenger plane is for $118 million. While the 737-700 and 737-800 cost $89 million and $106 million respectively.
In March 2019, most global airlines grounded their Boeing 737 MAX aircraft, which had only been on the market for 2 years. The reason was two major aviation disasters within 6 months. In October 2018, when the MAX was one of the most popular aircraft in the world, with total orders nearing 5,000, a plane from the Indonesian airline Lion Air crashed into the Java Sea. 189 people died. 6 months later, in March 2019, a plane of the same model crashed in Ethiopia, resulting in 157 fatalities. In both cases, the cause was technical malfunctions.
MCAS, a system to improve the aircraft's handling characteristics. Designed specifically for the Boeing 737 MAX model to facilitate aircraft control in difficult conditions.
The innovation was meant to automatically lower the aircraft's nose if it climbed too high. Even with the autopilot off, Boeing did not inform pilots about the system's nuances, like, to avoid overloading them with information. In turn, pilots couldn't control the system, of which they weren't even aware.
Now, that damn Lion Air needs a simulator to fly the MAX, perhaps because of their own stupidity. And here I am, trying to figure out how to make sense of all this. Idiots.
Here's how. A year before the disaster in Indonesia, a Boeing employee responded in an email to a colleague's request for additional training for Lion Air pilots on the MAX. The company assured that if the pilots had flown the previous 737 model, they could manage the MAX with just a brief computer-based course. The reason laid in money. Training pilots on simulators is expensive, and this could affect the final cost of the aircraft.
The world needs to know about the victims and their families, because this is the price we pay. Everyone talks about the financial losses for Boeing, about how much money they lose. But these are human losses.
Here's another reliability assessment of the 737 MAX from Boeing employees. In an email discussing the flight control system, one of them referred to the plane as created by clowns under the supervision of monkeys. The timeline for the MAX's return to service keeps getting delayed, and aircraft production has been halted. It was decided to dismiss Boeing director Dennis Muilenburg. The company itself must pay billions of dollars in compensation to airlines, pilots, and the families of those killed in the crashes.